Hello, as promised I'm going to show you game 1 from the Smyslov book. And this is a game between Gerasimov with white and Smyslov was playing black. The tournament was the championship of the Moskvoretsky House of Pioneers, played in Moscow in 1935. White opens with d4. Black meets this with d5. And after knight f3, knight f6, white plays a solid move, e3, rather than the usual c4 move. Black replies in kind solidly with e6. White develops his bishop, gets ready to castle kingside, puts the bishop on a good square with bishop to d3. Black hits at the centre, the d4 square with c5, gets in his pawn break. And white plays b3. And Smyslov has this to say in the notes. In this variation, the development of the bishop at b2 is associated with the idea of occupying e5 with the knight and beginning an attack on the king's side. Also possible is another method of play, whereby white prepares the opening of the centre by e3 to e4, after c3 on the 5th move, and knight b to d2. Okay, and that would be the Collie system. And this is the Collie-Zukertort system, which is a little bit more aggressive with those attacking ideas on the king's side. Okay, let's see how Smyslov handles these ideas. He plays a natural developing move, knight to c6. White fianchettos his bishop on b2. Black gains a little bit of influence over the central e5 square with bishop to d6, getting ready to castle. White castles, and now Smyslov plays queen to c7. And the idea of this is to stop the knight coming to e5. Black now controls that square. And that cuts out a lot of these attacking ideas that white has. In the notes, however, Smyslov points out that castles is also a good move. And the idea is if white does play knight e5, now you can play queen c7. And if white supports that with the natural f4, he's a little embarrassed by the following sequence. C takes d4, e takes d4, and now knight to b4. And there's a problem on the c2 square. The queen and the knight converge on this point, and that means the bishop can't move away, and on the next move black will be able to eliminate that strong attacking piece and will stand very well. If after castles white develops naturally with knight b to d2 instead, well, now the queen can go to e7, and there's a threat there of e6 to e5. And if white decides to prevent that, knight to e5 with the standard attacking ideas, f4, well, now black gets counterplay against the queen side by playing c takes d4, e takes d4, and bishop a3. And if we can exchange off these bishops and weaken the dark squares on the queen's side, we'll get good counterplay. Okay, well, queen c7 was Smyslov's choice. The ideas of knight b4 still hang in the air with the queen on c7, so white cuts that out with a3. Black could castle, but first decides to do something about this problem bishop on c8, which doesn't have any prospects on this diagonal. So he plays b6, decides to fianchetto that bishop to get some influence over the central squares. Again, white could play knight b to d2, but realising that he's never getting his knight e5 move in, he decides to handle the position in a different way and plays c4 to put pressure on the centre with the idea of bringing the knight into c3 behind the pawn. Black continues, bishop b7, natural move. Knight to c3 comes, and now there's a threat of knight b5, forking the queen and bishop. Black prevents that with a6. And now white played rook e1. And in the notes, Smyslov seems to have been more concerned about d takes c5, b takes c5, c takes d5, e takes d5, and rook to c1. And Smyslov says that this was more energetic, beginning a battle against the opponent's hanging pawns in the centre. Okay, but white played rook e1. And now perhaps a little worried about the idea of saddling in with the hanging pawns. Black played c takes d4, e takes d4, and castled, although this does open up the file for the rook. Now white played an interesting move. He played knight to a4. That looks rather strange, decentralising the knight like that. But there's a concrete idea behind it. He wants to play c5. And then if we're forced to capture on c5, the bishop will be opened up on this diagonal, and the bishops will rake down on the king side. Another way to play, a very safe way, might be to just capture on d5, and after takes back, it's a fairly equal position. We've blocked in this bishop on b7, but also the bishop on b2 is quite blocked. So that would be a very safe, solid way to play. White was more ambitious with knight to a4. And black played a provocative move here. He could capture on c4, play knight e7 perhaps, with a complicated position. But he played bishop f4. He may be trying to provoke the move g3, because then black could open up this diagonal, which has just been weakened by that move. D takes c4, b takes c4, and he could put the bishop on h6, or just come back to d6, and we can see now that bishop on b7 is very strong on that diagonal. If white goes for his idea of c5, Smyslov gives the following variation. He intended to meet this with b5, and if knight b6, rook a to d8. Now he continues the line with the move b4, which I'm not sure is entirely necessary. I'm sure white could find a better move than that. But his idea on such a move was to play knight to e4, sacrificing a pawn. Now white doesn't need to take this, and in fact he shouldn't take it when he stands well. But if he does capture the pawn, if he's tempted, Smyslov's idea was to play knight to e7, very strong move. And then when the rook moves out of the way from the gaze of the bishop on b7, black can take on f3, get his pawn back, come back to f4. And Smyslov says, with chances for both sides. And yes, that's probably true. It's a very double-edged position. But this c5 move is what white should have done. After bishop f4, he went for knight to e5. And after this, Smyslov's play is perfect. He's very strong indeed. He starts with d takes c4, opening up the bishop on b7. Obviously white captures back. Now he captures the knight on e5. White recaptures, d takes e5. And now rather than move the knight immediately, black flicks in queen to c6, threatening checkmate on g2. So white needs to do something about that. As Smyslov says, he should now have gone into an endgame with the move Queen f3, which doesn't look very appetising, I must say. And after Queen takes f3, G takes f3, go to d7 with the knight, hitting the pawn still under attack on f3, and if bishop b4, just defend the bishop, rook b8, rook a d1, knight c5, takes on c5, takes back, and the endgame is better for black. But still, this is what white should have done. With the queens on the board, black's attack soon becomes irresistible. So, white played bishop to f1. Natural move. If he'd played the move f3, black can now put the knight on the g4 square. Can't capture that because of the mate on g2. And now g3 is not very good because we can give this check, and after king g2, rook a to d8. It's very, very strong. So white would likely play bishop e4. Black takes on h2. Now king f1 isn't very good because we can just take that pawn with check on c4, and after bishop d3, queen f4, and the pieces are starting to swarm around the black king. So the king goes to h1, but now knight f2, forking king and queen, but black's queen's still under attack. White must take the bishop, black takes the queen on d1, bishop takes c6, takes black's queen, and now black recaptures and he's hitting the knight on a4. And this position is good for black. So after bishop f1, black gains a tempo on the queen, rook f to d8, always a good idea. And he has to keep the knight on a4 defended with his queen. So the queen goes to b3. He's moving away from the king's side. Now the knight's under attack, so it's time to move it. Knight to g4. And now you'll see there's no g3 because of queen h1 checkmate. So h3 is a natural move. And now, this next move is the reason why the game is in the book. It's a brilliant move. Black played rook to d3. His knight's under attack. Rather than move it, he puts his rook on pre. Now obviously bishop takes d3 can't be played because of queen takes g2, but why not queen takes rook? Well, the idea is that black plays a check on h2, king h1, and then knight takes f2 check, winning the queen. So white can't take it. The rook is immune. So he does the best that he can, and he takes the pawn on b6. So if the queen were ever to take on a4, then the bishop on b7 would be hanging. And the white knight's hanging, the rook's hanging, white's hoping to exchange queens. Looks like it might be a good move. But now black has an absolutely brilliant move, which just wins on the spot. And that move, rook takes h3. Now again, we can see that g takes h3 is no good because of queen h1 checkmate. But why not take the queen? Well, the idea is bishop h2 check, king h1 is forced, and now knight takes f2, checkmate. Very nice. So the position's lost for white, but he does the best he can. He plays bishop to d4, and he's trying to guard that f2 square from any of these knight takes f2 ideas. Black plays the check anyway, bishop h2, king moves to h1, bishop takes e5 check from the rook, which can't be captured because of the pin, and white resigned. 22 moves. Smyslov crushed him with a very nice attack. The point is that after king g1, bishop h2 check, king h1, and this time we go all the way back to c7 check, king g1, and just take the queen, completely winning. Very nice game from Smyslov, and as he says at the end, this was my first tournament game to be published, and that was published in the newspaper 64. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that game. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time for game 2.